that the bankers
Indian
should
market
come to know about it. We
Yes,
can have two, three things together.
थोड़ा सा बताइए.
sure, man. We'll take it
We'll
on
So
discuss it.
offline.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
we'll
Yeah.
discuss.
Yeah.
so it's yeah
Samir
sure.
bhai, just a
Thank you.
second. Good afternoon, Sanjay ji. Sanjay ji Motwani is from Sri Lanka.
Okay, Sanjay ji, good afternoon. A very
Yeah, good
warm good
afternoon. Good
afternoon.
afternoon.
What's the time there?
Same as India. There is no difference.
Okay,
How is Sri
okay,
Lanka
okay.
doing?
Sri Lanka is having its own problems, and
Uh-huh.
there's a foreign currency crunch as of
Uh-huh.
now.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
and
right.
but despite that, they are going. They have very bold plans. Two bold plans are that one, they're planning to go 100% organic, and second bold plan is they want to go have a 70-30 towards green energy.
Mm-hmm.
So despite foreign currency shortfall, they have very heavy plans to, for capex and to
Yes,
go green.
yes.
You know, we wouldn't
So
expect
it's high time.
anyone to.
Thank you, Sanjay ji. We will definitely get to that.
Sure, sure.
Now, for MSME perspective, we have to start with our webinar today. A warm good evening, warm good afternoon to everybody once again, and welcome to this MSME Perspective platform. Friends, we all know, okay, we all are going through this turbulent time, and in this situation, if any corporate or especially MSME makes any mistake, then it is really a very hefty mistake and one has to pay very heavy price for it. Especially in trade finance, in exports imports, we require some expertise, and that is why MSME Perspective today has invited a learned speaker in form of Arun Ambar. He is a trade finance consultant. We'll come back to him. We'll give his brief profile too. But before that, friends, about MSME Perspective. MSME Perspective is a digital platform focused on solutions to MSME to guide them through turbulent situations. Knowledge sharing and updation are the key pillars of MSME Perspective. We have digital presence in form of WhatsApp group, Telegram channel, YouTube channel, LinkedIn channel. Uh, Now let me introduce the speaker of the day. Arun Ambarji is an accomplished professional in the area of global trade finance operations and structured trade finance, foreign exchange, having cross-cultural experience spanning over 25 years. Wow, that's great. Arun Ambarji has his career with non-banking finance company, Exchange Advisory Services. He has moved on to work with one of the leading Indian banks, HDFC, as a deputy manager trade finance, and having acquired hands-on experience in trade finance, he then moved to Cargill Group of companies, one of the top two global trading companies in the world, as head of trading operations, trade operations. He went on to acquire in-depth understanding of the compliance and regulatory requirements and become an expert in designing and developing structured trade product solutions. He then worked with private hedge funds as managing directors and started its business operations for India. Arunji now works as freelance consultant in the area of trade finance and risk management, structured, structured products and trade credit insurance. He conducts trainings and workshops for corporates on various topics too, related to field. He also provides expert opinion on Indian exchange control regulations, that is PEMA, and other international trade finance guidelines for banks, credit insurance companies, and financial institutions. With this brief introduction, I would request Arunji to take up the session. Our sponsored speakers, our sponsored organizers, First Advisory and Blossom consultants are always with us. We would like to thank them for that. And before Arunji would take up, request to the attendees, please keep your camera off and your speaker on mute. Question answers shall be taken at the end of the session. You can always post your question in the chat box. Thank you very much. Now, Arunji, over to you.
Thank you, Sumir bhai. It was very nice once again to interact with the fellow members in this group. Uh, Whenever we talk about LC and trade finance, so I mean, whatever my experience is that four hours or 5 hours or even 8 hours are not sufficient to address all the aspects of trade finance and LCs in one session. But still, in during this time, it's not possible for us to conduct a day-long seminar and workshop. So we have decided in association with Samir Bhai and Rajesh Bhai that we will conduct snippets of around 1 hour, 1.5 hours of very brief topics which will touch upon the basics of LCs and the best practices across the globe on in trade finance domain. This is not a lecture from my side on LC, because I also believe that I still have a lot of things to learn in trade finance and in LC, UCP 600 and all. So what my endeavor is to learn from you guys who are into the market, have practical experience, and I have more of theoretical experience. So I can leverage my expertise and to become a little more accomplished trade finance practitioner. So this presentation is basically we will talk about various concepts of LC, because we have focused more on the concepts, and there are many terms and definitions which are very confusing. And this is not a very basic presentation. This is a slightly higher presentation in terms of skill set. So we expect that the participants will have a basic knowledge of LC and how does it function. And maybe it may be a repetition for some of you who have already are in this field and they are much more advanced, but please bear with me that and please help me also whenever you feel that I'm lacking on some aspects, so you can always pitch in and comment. So without further much ado, I just start. So in this 1 hour session, what are we going to talk about is that the risk issues which every buyer and seller they face when they are selling to each other, whether domestically or internationally, in terms of risk. Second is that we will talk about LC definition. Letter of credit is an extremely popular instrument, trade finance instrument, but we will talk about the definition also, and there are still some myths around LC. And then we will try to overcome that myth. Then there are some parties to LCs, and what are the roles and responsibilities of various parties of the LC, like issuing bank, confirming bank, nominated bank, advising bank. What are their roles and responsibilities? So as a beneficiary, if you are an exporter or you are an importer, you should know that what is your bank is supposed to do in terms of their roles and responsibilities. Then we will talk about negotiation. Negotiation is a term which is very often confused by all practitioners across the globe. I'm not talking about India also, but people have very ambiguous in understanding of negotiation. So we will talk about negotiation and try to clear the concepts. Then what is honor? UCP 600 has introduced a word called honor. So people are not aware that what actually is honor, and is there any difference between negotiation and honor? So we will talk about that only. We will spend brief time in this. And then what is confirmation? Confirmation we have chosen because most of the time India, we are catering to the exporters, and whenever they receive an LC, so most of the time they want their LC to be confirmed, and they pay heavy confirmation charges. So we would like to tell them that what is confirmation, what to expect from their confirming bank, and what are their rights. And then we will talk about the best practices on documents preparation, that as an exporter, when you are preparing a document, what are the best practices which is there in this industry across the globe. And we have chosen some of the best practices, and then we have brought it to your step that we should also try and adopt some of the best practices, so that the documentations are not discrepant and there is no problem in getting the money from the bank. So when we talk about the risk issues, international trade, there are risks everywhere. But when we talk about international trade, the two things comes two things are more, two kind of risk are more added here. One is the foreign exchange risk and the one is country risk. When we are talking about the domestic transaction, the foreign exchange risk and country risks are not there. So when you are an exporter, or when you are selling the goods to somewhere outside the country, or if you are importing goods into India, so you have to in addition to your commercial risk, you have to take care of the foreign exchange risk as well as the country risk. Some gentleman was just talking about in Sri Lanka that there is a foreign exchange problem. So this is exactly what we were talking about, that when we are dealing internationally, the foreign exchange risk also has to be mitigated to large extent. Please stop me, or just send me chat if you want me to dwell on any topic, please. I hope my voice is clear and my pace is okay with everyone.
Perfect.
Yeah, thank you. So what is LC? LC basically is a financing instrument. Okay, in a nutshell, you can say that it's a financing instrument. But in a financing instrument also, there are some features attached to the LC, that why it is different from the other financing instrument, why it is different from bank guarantee, why it is different from SBLC, why it is different from promissory notes or bill of exchange. So letter of credit is basically a kind of an undertaking from your banker. Your banker meaning when you are importing something, when you are buying something, and the seller is not happy with your credit rating, your credit worthiness. So he would like more comfort in terms of payment risk. So he doesn't like you to take risk on you. So rather he would ask your banker to give some kind of comfort that if the seller fulfills his obligation, then his payment is secured. So this is what LC is. So I have tried to fragment into 3 or 4 main aspects. Like, it's an irrevocable undertaking. Irrevocable means when it is issued, it cannot be revoked by anyone. So if the bank issues it, it is issued. It's an undertaking. That bank says that, okay, I undertake to pay you. It is issued by a banker to pay or accept to pay. Accept to pay means, okay, if I will pay right now or I will pay in future to a beneficiary against some document. So documents are very important. That bank will say that, okay, fine, if you submit me ABC documents, I will pay you at a specified expiry place. That place is there, that you have to present documents at that place and within some time period. So this is the LC definition. So undertaking by a banker to pay against some documents. This is in a nutshell, this is the LC. This is one of the most popular methods of settling international trade transactions so far. And after, before pandemic, people were saying that LC is losing its credibility, and open account transactions which are not involved, it doesn't involve LC, they are up on rise. But as if you ask me, I have whatever experience I have. So as long as we are doing cross-border transactions and we are dealing with new markets, new countries, LC will never go out of fashion or on trend, because in today's world, the risk, the payment risk or country risk or foreign exchange risk, they are huge, and with open account transaction, these risks are not mitigated at all. So you need somebody to assure your payment. So I think LC is going to stay here for at least for some time. Is seller wants security of payment, and as we said, what is that? Why the LC was introduced? That seller wants security of payment, and buyer wants an assurance that whatever goods he has asked for, those goods will be dispatched, and then only payment will be made. So buyer also is some kind of assurance is there, and seller also has this assurance that his payment will not get stuck if he fulfills certain condition. One thing is very important here to note, that the buyer, the applicant, is not a party to LC at all. The LC is a transaction between the banker and the beneficiary. So suppose if I am an importer from India, I get an LC, I issue an LC from State Bank of India, and I issue LC to my seller in USA. So the LC is between SBI and the beneficiary who is in USA. I don't have any role to play in that. Even if bank is issuing on my behalf, but I am not a party to LC. This is very, very important. So if the bank wants to make payment, if the bank, suppose tomorrow, if anything, technically I'm talking about that, if bank wants to stop payment under the LC, or if they say that, okay, even if I agree that, the payment should be made and bank has some problem that, they are not ready to accept those documents and all, the payment will not be made, even if you are the buyer. So LC is a contract between the issuing bank and the beneficiary. So we will talk about some definitions. Who is an applicant of the LC? Very simple. On the party on whose request the credit issue. Credit is a terminology used in UCP 600. So credit or LC or letter of credit, they are all the same thing. So a party on whose credit issues, if I go and to tell the bank that please issue an LC, I become an applicant. Beneficiary, in whose name the LC is issued. Nominated bank. Nominated bank is a kind of bank which is often get confused. People get confused is that who are the nominated bank? Nominated bank is the bank who has been authorized to handle that document. Suppose if I issue, suppose if I am a manufacturer of a phone, of a mobile phone, and I give it to somebody else, I send it to some country, and I say that this mobile phone can be used only with people who have got this much of credit or this much of bank balance. So those people are nominated by me, that nobody else can handle that phone except for those people. So nominated bank is also the bank which issuing bank authorizes them that, okay, you can handle this LC, nobody else can handle the LC. So they are called nominated bank. They are nominated. Confirming bank is the bank when what happens that as a beneficiary, suppose if I am getting an LC from say Ghana or any African country, and I'm not very much comfortable with the risk of that bank, Ghana bank, suppose. So I need some extra comfort in mitigating the risk on that bank, the issuing bank itself. So I'll go to my banker and I say that please add your comfort also. You please add your confirmation also, so that if something happens to Ghana, you will make me payment. So the bank who adds confirmation to the LC is called confirming bank. Advising bank is the bank who advises the LC. Basically, when the LC is received, it's a SWIFT mechanism. So whenever the LC is issued through SWIFT mechanism, the beneficiary don't get it directly. It's come in the bank in their SWIFT system, which is encrypted. So the bank takes a printout, which is decrypt them, then print out on a letter, on a piece of paper, and then send it to the beneficiary. So they are called advising bank. Their job is to simply advise the LC as a post office. Second advising bank, suppose if I am a exporter in India and I get an LC from say from a USA, and the LC goes to say Dena Bank. I don't have any relationship with Dena Bank. So Dena Bank, so I will ask that please send it to SBI. SBI will send me the LC. So Dena Bank will send to SBI and SBI will send it to me. So SBI will become the second advising bank who advises the LC to the beneficiary. And negotiating bank. Negotiating bank which negotiates the documents under the LC. We will talk about the negotiation in subsequent slides. So as of now, just stick to this, that negotiating bank is the bank who negotiates. We will talk about what is negotiation. Now, applicant, as the importer or a buyer, I have some roles. I should have some roles and responsibilities. So complete due diligence on their client is very, very must. Nobody else will do. They have to understand that UCP will not offer any protection. They have to prepare their LC on their own. Bank will only issue the LC. Bank can always advise them how to make an LC, but it's ultimately the responsibility stays with the applicant, because they have to make the LC in such a manner that all their terms and conditions, whatever they want, is there in that LC. The LC should be issued in a clear instruction. They have to remember that once LC is issued, it cannot be amended or cancelled. It can be amended, but beneficiary has to give his consent that okay, it can be amended. Cannot be cancelled at all. Any instruction given post issuance of LC to amend or waive discrepancy may be disregarded by the bank. As I said, bank has the authority to disregard my my instruction also, because I am not a party to LC. As I, meaning applicant, is not a party to LC. And it's very, very important for an applicant to remain aware of the UCP, Incoterms, and ISBP, and all the latest things what is happening around in trade finance domain. They should be aware. Similarly, issuing bank, they issue the LC, so they must comply with their bank policies and procedure. They should see that the LC which is being issued, they have the commodity or the transaction is a usual business of the client. It should not happen that a software company suddenly starts importing soybean or anything else. So it should fall within. So it is basically governed by whatever the policy the issuing bank has. Okay, so due diligence of the client they has to do, and educate client on best practices. Advising bank. I'm going a little fast because these are more technical, the more bookish things. So you just should need to be aware. We will come back to the more things which we need to discuss, which we need to spend time more. So advising bank must satisfy itself to the apparent authenticity. It's a very technical term, but what happens actually in reality, that banks just takes a printout and then give it to the beneficiary. They satisfy itself the apparent authenticity. They cannot say that it is genuine or fraud. Please remember, advising bank cannot say, and you cannot hold responsible an advising bank that this LC was a fraud. No, they are not responsible. They will just say that authenticity, that means that this LC has come from that source only. Suppose if the LC has to come from HSBC Singapore, they will say that okay, this LC has come from HSBC Singapore. That's about it. Whether they have issued a fraud LC or a problematic LC or it's a money laundering case, bank is not involved at all. These are the what happens that in advising bank case, what happens that many a times banks, they do not tell the beneficiary correctly, or the beneficiary also don't read the advising letter which comes along with the LC. So our request is to all the beneficiaries to read that advice letter of the bank. It says that whether who is bearing the charges, whether the bank is willing to act on his nomination. Suppose the advising bank is a nominated bank, they might refuse also to not act as a nominated bank. So if they are refusing, they have to tell the beneficiary. So unless we read the advising letter, which is a cover letter of the LC, we will not be aware of all these terms and conditions. Now there's one question, just a general question, that suppose if you receive an LC from your advising bank, and there's a second advising bank also. I believe example, the LC comes from say USA, and it comes to Dena Bank. Dena Bank is the advising bank, and Dena Bank, and then the second advising bank is SBI, and SBI advises to you. Now HSBC has mentioned that please confirm the LC. So will that instruction to confirm will be to Dena Bank or to State Bank of India?
Confirm to Dena Bank.
Correct. So all the instructions from the issuing bank will always be to the advising bank. Second advising bank is not into the picture at all. So thank you, sir. So moving ahead, roles and responsibility of nominated bank. Basically, nominated bank has got nothing to do, but we must understand that what is nomination. We talked about that they are instructed to do, they are authorized to do, but what actually they are supposed to do. The range of option to a nominated bank. Suppose if the LC is issued from SBI to say HSBC New York, so and they are the nominated bank, so they have got 4 options. First is a do nothing and decline to accept the presentation of documents. That means that when the beneficiary presents the documents to HSBC New York, they will say, sorry, we don't want to accept the presentation. Second option is that agree to accept the document, they will accept the document, but they will not examine. They will not scrutiny the documents. They will just pack the courier and they will send it to the issuing bank here, SBI. Third is they will accept the documents, they will examine the documents also, but they will not negotiate. We will come back to the negotiation in a little while, that they will not negotiate. That means they will not part money. They will not give you money immediately. And the fourth is they agree to accept the documents, they will examine also, and they will negotiate also. So only D section is reflecting that the bank is acting on its nomination. So if all these three things happen, that they accept the document, they examine the documents, and they negotiate also, then only the bank has acted on its nomination. And please remember, if the bank has acted on its nomination, it is always without recourse to the beneficiary. I repeat that if the bank has acted on its nomination, then it has to be without recourse to the beneficiary. So suppose if I present the documents to my nominated bank, so like in USA, presented to HSBC New York, they accepted the documents, they examined the documents, they said, okay, documents are fine. They negotiate also, that means I'll not say discount, but they parted away money with me, and then they sent the documents to issuing bank. Then if tomorrow something happens, it is without recourse. They cannot go back to the beneficiary. Please remember. In all other circumstances, A, B, C, the bank has not acted as the nominated bank. So the nominated bank has no obligation. Even if they are made nominated bank, they don't have any obligation to perform as a nominated bank. Because if somebody authorizes me to, okay, Arun is authorized to do all these things, I have the option that I may not do at all. So the bank has got option to not to act on their nomination. Confirming bank, which is very, very important, as we told that it is a confirmed letter of credit. Somebody else has to confirm on behalf of issuing bank. It is always without recourse. Always without recourse. The confirmation. They add their commitment, and they take money also for that, adding that commitment, and it is always without recourse to the beneficiary. In cases where the beneficiary would think that the issuing bank's credit risk is not comfortable enough, or the country in which it's located, it is not acceptable risk, then they always go for a confirmation. And we always say to our clients also that if you feel that okay, the bank or the country is not comfortable as per your risk matrix, please go and get your LC confirmed. Of course, you have to give some charges, but you will be having a peaceful sleep. A confirmation is not a security of payment. We will come to that many a times the exporter has got a incorrect notion that if the LC is confirmed, then their payment is secure. No, there are some obligation has to be done by the beneficiary. One is that confirming bank can withdraw its confirmation without beneficiary's consent. What happens that if the confirming bank has added their confirmation to an LC, they can always lift their confirmation without telling the beneficiary. But they will always, without beneficiary's consent, they will tell the beneficiary, but without consent, they will not ask for any consent of beneficiary that whether I lift the confirmation or not. They can do that. They will always have to advise the beneficiary that I am lifting the confirmation. And in this, I just wanted to add that whenever the LC is confirmed, the confirming bank always gives a confirmation letter. That's a covering letter. 99% of the time, the exporter or the beneficiary, they don't read that letter. Their trade finance department or whosoever is handling the LC, they don't read those confirmation letter. That is extremely important to read and go through each and every word of that confirmation letter. And please go back to the confirming bank if you don't understand any of the thing, because everything is mentioned there in that letter. So confirming bank tells you that in what circumstances they will lift their confirmation, and if you do not pay any attention, you will be in soup. I have faced this kind of issue long time back. What happened that one of the client, they got their LC confirmed. At that point in time, I think I'm talking about around 10 years back. That translated for a $5 million LC, which they have received from somewhere else. In India, the exporter was in India. They got the LC confirmed from, I think, HSBC or Standard Chartered. They gave all the confirmation. They got all the confirmation letter. Nobody bothered to read anything. It was mentioned that, and it is always a very standard letter. It's a standard printed letter without signature and say that it is. So they said it is just a general letter. So they did not go ahead and read the complete letter. It said that the document have to be presented at our counters for us to add confirmation. They missed out on that, and despite paying so much of heavy confirmation charges, the confirmation was lifted. And unfortunately, what happened that there was a delay in the payment from the issuing bank. On $5 million, they waited for 15 days. So you can understand, the amount of interest or the amount of, amount of, penal interest which they paid on 15 days for $5 million. I'm talking about at that point in time, it was around 45 or 48 rupees the dollar was. So it was a huge sum. So what my request to all my fellow exporters are that please read those confirmation letter. That's very, very important. Amendments are not confirmed if the LC is confirmed. Many times people have this notion that if the main LC is confirmed, amendments are also confirmed. No, this is not the case. Please read that again confirmation letter. Bank will always say, confirming bank, that we add this confirmation to amendment also. If they are not, that means it is not amended, it is not confirmed. Please get it clarified. Now, coming back to negotiation. Negotiation is very important. It's a very loosely talked term as of now in UCP. People always compare it with discounting. Please remember, discounting is not defined in UCP. In entire UCP 600, you will not find a word called discounting. Discounting is used. I mean, the concept is discounting only here also in negotiation, but in true sense, it is not discounting. I'll tell you why. So negotiation, I have fragmented in 4 parts, wherein it is easy to understand for a normal person that what is negotiation. It is purchase of draft or documents. Simple. When you are purchasing a draft, meaning bill of exchange, or you are purchasing a document, you can purchase a document also by nominated bank. Why nominated bank? Because they are the only authorized to do this. Nobody else can do. So it's basically negotiation. First rule is that it is purchase. Second, if there is a draft, if there is a bill of exchange, if at all has been asked under the LC, it must be drawn on some other bank rather than the nominated bank. So if HSBC New York is negotiating the LC, the draft, if it is there in the LC, it should not be drawn on the HSBC New York, but it should be drawn on either on the issuing bank or reimbursing bank. So most 99.9% of the time, it is always on the issuing bank. So many times you will see that LC which is incorrectly issued, the LC is a negotiation LC and the draft is also drawn on the nominated bank, which is not. So technically, draft has to be drawn on some other bank than the nominated bank. Nominated bank will advance funds right now or agreeing to advance. That means they'll part away the funds right now. They'll give you the funds right now, or they will agree to give you funds, say in future date. Like say if the LC is say 60 days from the date of shipment, so they'll say, okay, fine, I will give you funds on 30th day or 45th day. So it can be advancing right now, or it will agreeing to advance that, okay, I'll do in future. And the most important aspect of a negotiation is that the transfer of funds has to happen before the nominated bank gets reimbursement, meaning nominated bank has to pay from their own pocket. So ultimately what happens that, all the payment has to go from the issuing bank under the LC. So it should not happen that they receive the payment from the issuing bank and then they advance the funds to beneficiary. No, this is not a negotiation in that case. Negotiation is always when you use your own funds. So whenever, so it can happen that, suppose if somebody is in USA and from India, if we are sending the funds, so it is always one value date later, 1 day later. So if the payment is made, say today is 4th of September, I made a payment on 4th of September, and if the negotiating bank makes payment value date before 4th, it's called a negotiation. So these are 4 things which is very, very important to understand, and if these 4 criteria is met, then only it's a negotiation, otherwise it's not a negotiation. Is this clear?
Yes, sir.
Now, honor. Honor is a word which is used in UCP 600 only, and many people get confused that either they will also say that it is similar to negotiation, because there is no practical difference between an honor and a negotiation. But actually, what actual honor means? Honor means to pay at site if the LC is at site payment, to incur a deferred payment undertaking, and pay at maturity if the credit is available by deferred payment. Deferred payment means payment which is deferred, which is being deferred. So if payment is not happening today, it can happen after 60 days. So pay at maturity when the credit is available with the deferred payment maturity. Third is to accept a bill of exchange, that is a draft drawn by the beneficiary, and pay at maturity if the credit is the LC is available by acceptance. So this is the definition of honor. Now, UCP says that there is a major distinction between honor and negotiation, that issuing bank, they do not negotiate. Issuing bank always honor, and who can negotiate? Only the nominated bank can negotiate. So that is the only difference between the honor and negotiate. So tomorrow, if you hear a word honor, please remember that we are talking about the issuing bank, that they are making payment. Issuing bank honors. Issuing bank, when nobody else can honor except issuing bank. If anybody else, if other nominated bank is making a payment or negotiate or doing something else, it is called negotiation. I hope I'm clear on this. We can go again if you want.
Yes, we can go ahead, and question answers can be drafted, posted therein.
So now let's come back to confirmation. We talked about confirming bank also. So what is confirmation? So we just wanted to spend some time on confirmation, because from the exporter community, it's always a very valid point that that they don't understand confirmation, or the confirming bank, they don't act properly on their confirmation. So we will wait for some 5-10 minutes, and we will just discuss this confirmation piece, that the confirming bank has no recourse to beneficiary in the event of. So we said that confirmation is always without recourse to beneficiary. So in what cases the confirming bank can't come to the exporter? When there is a default by issuing bank. Suppose if you receive an LC from Ghana, you get it confirmed by State Bank of India. State Bank of India negotiates. Again, negotiation. They did the negotiation. They paid you. And suppose on maturity date, that is 60 days later, the Ghana bank fails. They say that, sorry, I can't make payment to you. SBI cannot come to you. It's a without recourse. Country risk. If there is a problem in the Ghana and there is no foreign exchange, or the problem, there's a political risk, like just happened in Syria or in Afghanistan. So still SBI cannot come back to you and say that, sorry, you have to give my money. No, it's a without recourse. An issuing bank finding discrepant document. What happened that when you present the documents, when SBI made payment to you, they must ensure that the whatever document, because remember, LC, what was the LC? LC was an undertaking by a banker to pay against some documents. So if SBI has paid you, that means they have checked the document. They must have checked the documents. So if they checked the documents and they found out that there is no problem in the in the document, so they make payment. So when the document goes to issuing bank at Ghana and they pointed out some discrepancy which was missed out by SBI cannot come back to you and say that please give my money because Ghana bank is not giving me the money. No, sorry. So this is an important slide from beneficiary perspective, that understand the value of confirmation, because you paid so much of money for confirmation, and this confirmation depends. I mean, it ranges from 1% to it goes up to 2.5-3% depending upon the bank and the country. So review the LC and confirmation advice upon receipt. Whenever you receive a confirmation advice with the covering letter from the confirming bank, please read it very, very carefully. Determine what the terms, and you have to also understand when you receive the LC that what terms and conditions you can comply with. There should not be any bizarre term and condition which you cannot comply, and the applicant say that no, it doesn't matter, we are doing it for 5 years, we will manage it out. Okay, fine, you can manage it, but the document, when the document becomes discrepant, the confirmation will be lifted. So entire money, whatever you have paid, 1% or 0.5% as a confirmation charges, will go waste. If the documents are discrepant, of course, then we have to see what choice do we have. And as a future course of correction, we should identify that why presentation was not correct, so that we can make it correct in the subsequent presentation. So that's a kind of a learning lesson learned for your entire team. And of course, risk and monetary loss of a stance of forwarding document, that you have to be at the mercy of the issuing bank and the applicant, that you have to wait for the payment because your documents are discrepant. Now, till here we covered the LC, all the applicants and their roles and responsibilities, and we understood what is the confirmation, what are the value of confirmation from beneficiary perspective, what they should do, what is negotiation, what is honor, how negotiation is different from honor. So now we will move to the next section of the presentation, which is like document preparation. When we say document preparation, basically there are three main aspects of this document preparation. One is that everybody wants to create the ideal presentation under the LC, so that there is no problem at all. Documents are clean. It's just smooth process. Document presented, document paid, and everything is done. And second, how to make it, how to make the presentation ideal by reducing data, and the discrepancy rate has to be reduced. And there are some principles of UCP 600, especially 14D, and we will not go into the detail of 14D and 14F because of the time constraint, because these are very big topics to handle, but still we will discuss it to a large extent, what are the principles and how should we move ahead in terms of document preparation. What makes the documents comply, presentation comply? Clearly when it is in conformity with the terms and condition of the LC. Documents should always be prepared according to the specific requirement of the LC. That whatever LC needs, we should prepare the documents as per the LC. Is not that what is usually used. Right? What happens that many a times, what happens that the LC wants some kind of different doc, because every time you're not dealing with the same supplier or buyer. Please understand, you are dealing on a daily basis. You are dealing with a different buyer. Okay, so the specification of documents may be different from one buyer to another buyer. But if your system or if your presentation is or if your document preparation is of one kind of a standard, then it might create problem with the presentation, because it might be good for one kind of LC, but it might not be for other kind of LC, and then that may result in some kind of discrepancy in the LC in the documents. For example, a requirement of packing list does not require, because packing list is a very often a document which is dealt with discrepancy many a times. Packing list. So what happens that people give a multiple pager document of packing list, whereas it could be as simple as one line that all goods covered by invoice number such and such are packed in container such and such. This is a packing list. If you have to give a detailed packing list because of some arrangement with your buyer, please give it outside LC. Do not make it a part of LC, because the more data you will produce on your document, the more chances of getting it discrepant. Because we will come back to that why unnecessary data should be avoided at all cost. Commercial invoice example, that many a times I have seen commercial invoices which has got so many information which is not required at all. For instance, what info has to be there for a commercial invoice? It should have a name of applicant. It should the same currency as the credit, because it is a requirement of LC that it should be the same currency of the LC. A description of goods which is there in the LC, the quantity what is shipped, the amount, Incoterms. These are the six items which should be there in any of the invoice. In any commercial invoice, not anything more than this is a additional data. Trust me. But in reality, what happens? You can always see in your organization what kind of invoice to be present. It will have weight, packing details, shipping mark, origin of goods, vessel name, port of loading, all kind of things. Problem happens that these information are fine to be there on that invoice, but suppose if the vessel name is MV Fairy Tale and by mistake you have mentioned on your invoice MV Tail Fairy, or if the vessel name is say Disney and you have written MV Daisy, it's a complete data mismatch. Your documents will be rejected outrightly. Why? Because there is a conflict of data. A vessel name, actual vessel name is MV Daisy. By mistake, you have mentioned in your invoice MV whatever, different name. So in the invoice, it is not required to mention the vessel name at all. So we have to be extremely careful that any additional data which is being shown on any of the documents should not have any conflict with the main data. There should not be a conflict between two separate documents. The facts, there are some bearing facts as far as the discrepancy rate is concerned. 75% of our documents are discrepant on first presentation, approximately. This is true as on 2019-20. 75% of documents are discrepant. Why? Because there is an additional data discrepancy, data mismatch. These vast majority are eventually paid because then you have a good relationship buyer and seller, but this incurs additional cost, working capital cost. And in today's world, in the pandemic world where everybody is hard pressed for money, if there is some kind of discrepancy and the payment gets stuck, the buyer, God forbid, the buyer is not in a good financial position, then he has all the reasons to delay the payment. So this becomes extremely important for us to present the documents in a clean manner. As I said, majority of all discrepancies related to conflicting data between documents. It means that each document essentially complies individually, but when the data is compared between documents, it is a conflict. MV Daisy and MV Lily, something. Port of loading here, say Navasheva, maybe in some other document it says MV GNPT. So there is a conflict. And there is no room for nice to have information. Please, in LC, please stick to the basics. Whatever the LC is needed, please have that information only. Now let's compare to document preparation. There are some expressions not defined in UCP 600. Many a times I have seen in the LC which is issued from India, they say shipping documents, stale documents acceptable. This is a very common terminology. Third-party document acceptable. These have no meaning. This has no meaning. You should not use any of these documents in the LC. So what ISBP says, ISBP is a standard banking practices, that there is the set of guideline how to check the documents. So there's a guideline on this, that if these 4 terms are used in NLC, then they will have this meaning. Shipping documents will mean all documents except draft. So shipping document does not mean only BL. Shipping documents mean everything except bill of exchange. So even if the packing list also is shipping document, so better not to use this term at all. Shipping documents, like suppose if you in your LC you say that shipping documents to be sent to applicant within 5 days from the date of dispatch. Don't expect that shipping documents mean only BL. They will send everything. Okay, and shipping document, even if they will send the packing list, that will also become a shipping document because it is not defined. So better not to use this word at all. Stale documents acceptable. This is a very classic case. Stale documents acceptable. All the banks they use, even in domestic LC, this word is used interchangeably. Every LC you will see this term. Stale documents are not acceptable, or the stale documents are acceptable. There's no terminology. But if it is used, it will be assumed that it means a document presented later than 21 days after the shipment, but within the credit is acceptable. No other meaning. Third-party documents. Again, some of the LC say third-party documents not acceptable, or third-party documents are acceptable. So third-party documents mean all documents except draft. So it can be issued by anybody other than beneficiary. So if you say third-party documents acceptable, that means invoice can also be issued by somebody else. Please remember this. So these terminology should not be used at all in the LC. It's basically, I would not, I mean, to all the credit with the bank and all. So some of the banks, what they have done is that they have not changed their LC templates since 1950 or 1960. So they have to come to the the present day, whatever happening in the market, and they have to align themselves with the existing norms of the trade finance. So these are printed sheet of paper which is going on since ages, and then beneficiary just fills up everything and then they give it to the bank, and then bank issues. So these terminologies are just printed there. So we should always try and resist all these things from if some banks are coming with all these notations or these comments. We should always resist them. An exporting country has got no meaning. It can be whether beneficiary is domiciled, or the country of origin of goods, or the country of receipt from the shipment is made. So it's a very vague term. So better not to use exporting country at all. Original and copies. This is an important, so I thought I should include. When the LC requires one invoice or invoice in one copy. So there's always a confusion what to present. Do we present original? Do we present copy? Do we present Xerox copy? What? So if the LC says one invoice or invoice in one copy, it will be understood to requirement of one original invoice. Okay. If invoice is 4 copies, that means at least one original is needed. Rest 3 can be photocopies. So these are important. If some LC say that invoice in 4 copies and you give all 4 copies, all 4 photocopies, it will be discrepancy. So it should be always better that you get it clarified and the LC is issued as explicitly as possible. However, if these kind of terms are there in the LC, like invoice in 4 copies or packing list in 4 copies, that means at least one original has to be there. One copy of invoice means either an original or a copy. So there is difference in the wordings. Please see. Invoice in 1 copy, invoice in 4 copies, 1 copy of invoice. It's very confusing, but yeah, the way it is. So that is why it's always, we practitioner always advise our clients that to make as explicit as possible. It should not be. Please write 1 original invoice plus 3 copies, so that there is no ambiguity at all. Point to be noted by beneficiary whenever any LC is received. I mean, we always tell the beneficiary that whenever you enter into any transaction and the LC is received by you, please go ahead and do some things before it is too late. So examine the LC. Please go through the first of all, and in fact, to have a draft LC is an excellent process, is an excellent method of reducing the amendments. That, ask your buyer that please give me a draft of the LC before you get it issued finally, so that you can always go through it and point out if there is some error or if you can't fulfill any condition. Always consult your bank for their views. I mean, practically it may not be possible, but wherever it is possible, that you should always consult your bank or your advisors, that just go through this LC whether you find any kind of problem and or no. Amendments also are very, very crucial, and you should always be examining the amendment. This is data. Too much of data is always detrimental to the health of documents. 40% data are unnecessary and they create conflict. So stick to the LC only. Internal procedure should be there, that they should monitor the level of refusal, that you should always do a check that why documents are getting refused. Is it because of additional data? Is it because of human error? Is it because of the bank's understanding the concept of UCP and all? So all these things, or operational delay like late shipment or late presentation, all these kind of things. And additional cost, of course, you should calculate the additional cost which is involved when you have a discrepant document and your payment gets delayed. Best practices which we have seen across the globe in terms of document preparation, and I always strongly advise to all my exporters, comply solely on LC terms and conditions. Data need not be identical, but they do not conflict. For instance, if the LC is issued for say 1,000 tires, 1,000 tires, and if you present, and if your document, one of the documents says, suppose if your BL says 1,000 truck tires, the data is not identical, but it is not conflicting. But if it says 1,000 radios or 1,000 batteries, then there is a conflict. If something says that 1,000 kilo of aluminum and you present the documents with 1,000 kilo of steel, of course it's a conflict. A pen and pencil, but if a pen is written and if one of your documents says fountain pen, there is no conflict of data. Keep to the bare minimum of data. Additional data can always be sent outside the LC. We always tell that do not compromise on your whatever procedure and systems are there. You always send the data, but outside the LC, directly to that applicant. Don't present under the LC. Keep it simple and keep it short. That's the best practice which we have to follow. And believe me, adopting these principles will certainly help in a long way. We always do this way because what happens that in traditional Indian companies, or in fact I would say MNCs also, the people are trained in certain manner and they are not encouraged to use their brains and all, and they say that no, this is what they have been trained, and they don't apply their mind and they just keep on following the practice, whether it's good or whether it's an obsolete practice. They don't care, and that is why the problem starts happening. And this is happening from the both sides, from the bank as well as from the corporates. So get out of this mindset that we always do this way, this is what I was taught. Like change with the market. And always ask this question whenever you're presenting the documents: does the LC or UCP require it to appear? If it is not, then there is not a place. This is a general sanity check which everybody should do, whether you are an importer or exporter, that upon receipt of LC or whenever you issuing the LC, with issuing bank, advising bank, tenor, because these are the points where the maximum chances of discrepancies are there, that there is a conflict, that in your contract it is FOB shipment and the LC issued as CFR, or or there is some condition like which you cannot comply with. So for instance, if the LC says that you have to send the document a copy of documents to the applicant within 2 days from the date of shipment, and the document which you could, the BL which you can receive from your freight forwarder, it itself will take 4 days. So you cannot. So just stuck down that point and say that this is not possible. So get it amended or get it changed before you accept it, because you are never going to do this kind of. I'll tell you a very excellent example, and it happened with one of my clients. What happened that there was an LC issued, and this was an exporter issued got an LC from, I think it was USA. So one of the condition was there that this consignment has to be checked. There was some chemical, some machinery or chemical was there. So it said that this has to be checked with a certain agency, XYZ. They gave the name of this agency. Okay, this has to be certified by this agency, and their certificate should accompany the documents. And LC was received. Nobody paid any attention to all this, and everything was like done. At the time of document preparation, they started preparing the document. Then the document preparer, they asked the material guy that give me this certificate. Then the hanky panky start, because that company's office was not in India, and they did not realize at point of accepting the LC. That company did not open the LC, their office in India, and the nearest was in Singapore. So there was no scope of any amendment also, because buyer was stuck that no, this is an absolutely critical thing that this has to be examined by this company only. They had no option, believe me. They had to ask that gentleman to fly down from Singapore. He fly down from Singapore to Mumbai, stayed in here for at least 7-8 days, and they spent at least 1.5 lakhs or more than 2 lakh rupees extra because of this human oversee. They oversaw this. So the point here I'm trying to make is that you should be absolutely crystal clear. If you are not if the guys are not competent enough to take care of this, so get it checked with your banker at least. So banker may be able to tell you that these kind of conditions, can you meet this or not. So this is very important thing. And look for any contradictory condition or any restriction clause. This is very important, that restriction clause, meaning that you cannot do that, and still it's the conditions are there in the LC which you cannot fulfill, and which party bears the charges, which is very important. Sometimes there is a confusion on the charges. So this is absolutely very clear. And the reimbursement instruction is not for us, but more of the bank. But still, you should, as a party to the LC, you should always be aware that who is getting what reimbursement. Final word, what I would say that is the documents with discrepancy. Suppose if there is a document with discrepancy, then what we have to do? What are the options we have? We have to return the document for correction wherever possible, meaning if the time is there, we can always correct the documents and represent if the time is still there and the LC is not expired. Second is that send the message to issuing bank with a permission to negotiate the bill, despite discrepancy. Then you have to be at the mercy of the buyer or the issuing bank, that if they will make payment, then only you will get the payment. Otherwise, the payment will set. So you use your good offices to make the payment as early as possible, and authorize the bank to send the. Don't use many a times bank use this word approve. We are sending the documents on approval basis or collection basis or interest. Do not use these words at all. I mean, bankers, to give all credit to the bankers, but they don't understand that still, even if the documents are discrepant, they're still under UCP 600. So there is no word called approval or collection basis. So if the documents are under LC, they cannot become a document under collection if they are discrepant. The document will be still under UCP 600, but it will be discrepant. So the documents are going to the issuing bank. It's up to the issuing bank. What do they do? So do not add anything, all these kind of wordings. and get it right before sending out, because there is no point that if you send the discrepant document, then a lot of hassle is there for for everybody whosoever is involved. So in rectification, and most of the time what happens that you get only 20 days before after the shipment, so the timing is too less for to do any corrections afterwards. So better safe than sorry. So that's it from my side. I hope I did not take much time. Yeah, approximately 1 hour. So I was pretty okay type. So I will be okay with the questions, whatever you have, guys have.
Thank you very much, Arun. It was really a very good presentation, very simple way, and I hope our participants have enjoyed it. And definitely,
Thank
they
you.
will be having some questions. May I request Ankit ji and Rajesh ji to take up the questions as are appearing in chat box, and definitely others can also speak in between if they have any specific questions. Thank you.
Hello.
Yes, sir. I can hear you.
Thank you, Samir bhai. Thanks a lot for giving me opportunity to take care of the certain aspect of the session. Hello. Hello.
Yes, sir. We can hear you.
Yeah. So before I proceed with the question, I just a small announcement with all the members. Please start sharing their questions in the chat room, because right now there are only 3 questions, which I will be taking one by one. First question is from Mr. Ashok Bhai Jha. What is the recourse available to seller if banker refused to honor the LC despite all document has been presented due to one reason or any other reason?
Recourse available to seller if the banker refuses to honor the LC. Why would a bank refuse to honor the LC if the documents are discrepant, sir? Just wanted to understand. Rajesh bhai, can you unmute Mr. Ashok Jha?
Uh, Ashok Bhai,
Uh, Ashok ji, are you there?
Okay,
Yes.
he may not be there, but sir,
Yes.
I'll tell you, just in the interest of everyone. See, sir, document, if
Yes.
the document,
Sometimes banker refuse to honor because like Bank of China
uh,
in some of the period
uh,
they say that inability of the client to their credit limits is not there. So like that sometimes they refuse. So is there any recourse available for seller, sir?
sir, I'll tell you. Okay, uh, as we just discussed that LC is a contract between the seller and the issuing bank. Okay, so buyer's creditworthiness or buyer credibility has got no role to play in the entire LC mechanism. So if the Bank of China is saying that the big, since the applicant has got no money and that's why they can't pay, that's absolutely wrong. They cannot do this. So what you can do is that the next time, of course, you should not you should not accept the LC from Bank of China, first of all. Second, you ask your banker here that you raise a very strong message to Bank of China or whosoever bank is that this is not acceptable. This is against the UCP 600 rule, and they can complain against them in ICC, in the courts of ICC. So you can always do that, sir. But
Okay.
a bank cannot say like only to mitigate the risk of the buyer. You have chosen the LC from a bank. So if the bank also starts saying that because of a buyer's credit worthiness they are not able to pay, that's absolutely rubbish. They cannot do this.
Rajesh, second question, please.
hello.
Yes, sir.
I'm letting Mr. BVM and Gaurav Timari to raise their question because they've raised the hand. Hello.
So questions are already there in chat box. If we can finish that first, then definitely those can be taken afterward.
Sure. We'll go in that sequence. Next question is from Sandeep Kaul. Please advise if there is a validity period or stale for invoices and BL.
Please advise is if there is a validity period stale for invoices. No, sir. As such, invoice and BL, they don't have any expiry date. You have to mention in the LC that whatever the time period is for document presentation. Normally, what we have seen is that people give 21 days from the date of shipment, and if you can always make it 30, 40, whatever you and your buyer decides. You can always make that. But if nothing is written in the LC, so the rule is that if nothing is mentioned about the presentation time, then it will be 21 days from the date of BL only. But you can make it 30 days, 40 days, whatever you feel like.
Thank you, sir. Now I'm moving to the next one. This question is from Yusita Disanayak. Can you explain UPAS LC?
UPAS LC. UPAS LC is actually a terminology, is a new term, not new terminology, but it's an acronym. It is usance LC paid at site. Nothing, there's nothing technical about it. It's a usance LC, meaning the LC which has got tenor. That there is a site LC which is payable immediately, and there is a usance LC which is paid in future, like 30 days, 60 days, or 90 days. Okay, so when somebody finances it, suppose if you are getting an LC from, say, your buyer, and this LC is 180 days from the date of shipment, what you can do, so what happens that you can get payment only after 180 days as a beneficiary. So what you can do, that in the LC mechanism itself, sometimes what happens that the buyer, they make an arrangement that you can get paid at site, and the interest cost is borne by the buyer. So at maturity, the buyer will take care of the interest plus the principal also. So this is nothing but usance LC payable at site. So you get paid immediately rather than being paid at the maturity date. So this is the only difference. All the usance LC can be a UPAS LC. It's only the arrangement between the buyer and seller who bears the discounting or the interest charges. That's about it.
Thank you very much. What should be approx percentage to be calculated in the cost while quoting?
While quoting what? Percentage of...
while quoting for the proposal. This question is from Ms. Kajal Anand. Kajalji, can you elaborate?
What I want to know is while we are taking a cost of the product, what is the percentage of LC cost should we take? 2%, 3%?
Madam, LC cost is a very subjective term, and it depends from the bank to bank. So it depends on what facility your bank has given. Many a times what happens that bank gives an all-in cost with that, the LC issuance, document handling and everything, they will give a composite rate of say 1% or 0.5%.
Okay.
Sometimes it is a composite, sometimes it is a separate cost, that for LC issuance they will charge 0.35, for document handling 0.1, and for SWIFT 500. So it varies from client to client and from bank to bank. So there is no standard rule for this.
But then approximate 2 to 3% can be considered, right?
That's on a higher side,
overall,
I would say it's a higher side. Only for LC issuance it should be around 1.5%, not more than that.
My second question is, does every bank, whoever are involved, give confirmation of the LC in writing? Is it that we should take from every bank in writing the confirmation?
Depends. That if the bank is willing to add its confirmation, then they have to give in writing. It's always in writing only. Okay.
And finally, could you provide the source of the UCP guideline, 600 guideline?
It's a ICC presents has a rule. They have created this rule. International Chamber of Commerce. It is there in the website also. You can Google it and you can get it a downloaded copy. Not a problem. Or you can buy it from the ICC website also.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Most welcome. Next question is from Mr. Rajat Arora. can we discount LC? Payment term is deferred payment term or by negotiation?
Yes, you can. LC is a payment mechanism. If the deferred payment means deferred payment, and there are two kind of usance LC. One is deferred LC and one is acceptance LC. The only difference between these two is that deferred LC has no bill of exchange and acceptance LC has got bill of exchange. Okay, so deferred payment LC can always be discounted, not a problem at all. And so you can always go ahead and discount the LC with anyone.
Thank you, sir. Next question I'm moving. It's from Rishikesh Joshi. In case of factoring of document with NBFC or foreign bank, can they have a recourse under Negotiable Instrument Act?
Factoring of documents with NBFC, can they have recourse under Negotiable Instruments Act? Negotiable Instrument Acts are basically you have to specify that because all the geography, they don't have the same Negotiable Instrument Act which we have as in India. But if you are talking about the factoring as of now is only done without recourse only by most of the factors who are working in India. Okay, so whenever they are doing a factoring services for your export receivables, mostly I would say 90% of them, they do it without recourse, and very less of them they do with recourse. So factoring can be done without recourse also.
Thank you very much. Next question is from Gaurav Tiwari, which is again for UPAS LC, which you already covered. Then the next is, suppose the LC is having authorization condition, applicant is refusing to authorize, then how LC will secure beneficiary consent?
Absolutely, this is a brilliant question, sir. You should not accept this LC at all, because as we said that LC is between seller and the issuing bank. If the LC is having a condition wherein they are going to get the authorization from the applicant, then the entire meaning of LC gets defeated. So you should not accept any kind of LC which either calls for authorization or calls for any documentation from the applicant or anything for that matter, wherein you have to be dependent on applicant. Don't accept any LCs.
Thank you very
Sir,
much.
excuse me, that question
Sure.
from my side. I'm Prasad Menon from UAE, Treasury Manager. Because these type of concerns we are facing everywhere, because we are doing in a local LCs here, transport and documents. There is no transport document for that one. So we should comply on the authorization on the delivery note. So sometimes they are refusing to accept the authorization. So what the bank will secure out, how the bank will secure our payment? That's my concern.
Sir, if you are very simple, I mean, if you as a beneficiary, if you have dispatched the goods, okay, and if you have presented the documents to the issuing bank, and the issuing bank wants that there's something to be accepted by the applicant, that means they will wait for the applicant to confirm that. Okay, so the entire purpose of LC, which is like you are depending on the issuing bank to make payment for you, whereas they have gone further and they are waiting for applicant to do something and then they will do. So the entire purpose of LC is defeated, sir. So your interests cannot, in these cases, the beneficiary's interest cannot be protected at all, because you are dependent on those applicant. What if the applicant doesn't authorize those? What will happen to your payment? Your payment will never happen. So
then
sorry, go ahead.
Then there is a risk. But when I contacted the local bank, they have mentioned, they said you have to put the condition. Some condition is there. If it is not accepted within the particular time, the LC will be automatically will be credited to your account. Like that wordings is there given. But is it possible like that we can put it in the LC?
Sir, I need to see, because as of now I can't comment, but prima facie, going by the whatever you are said about your case, is that generally speaking, if anything, like one LC I saw wherein it said that there will be a testing certificate certified by the applicant to be presented along with the document. Now imagine if you are a beneficiary, and if you are sending some goods worth whatever, and you have already sent the goods, and you you have to present one document which is issued by the applicant. What if applicant doesn't authenticate or doesn't issue the goods or doesn't issue that documents? Then what will happen? Then your documents will be discrepant because you have not complied with the document presentation. So as long as they are not giving you that document, your payment getting stuck. So you should be very extremely careful of those LC wherein you are dependent on applicants' action. That is why this is my submission, is.
Thank you. So it's thank you, sir. It means always risk.
Yeah, it is.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Menon, if you have more questions, you can probably send our email.
Yeah.
And we'll connect you offline with the speaker, because we are 124 and there are a lot of questions and we are beyond the schedule. And session is so interesting that all members 61 are still there in the webinar.
No problem, sir. I can sit down, not a problem. And if I'm not able to answer, here is my email ID. Please, they can always reach out.
Thank you very much. Next question is from Hassan Mohammed. Confirmation charges is quite high for import side LC. How to avoid that charges?
Sir, confirmation charges depends on two aspects. One is that country of issuing bank, and the second is who is the issuing bank. So the confirmation charges are directly proportional to these two factors. Any risky country will certainly, the confirmation charges will be extremely high. Like tomorrow, like right now also, all African nations, they have the LCs issued, which is a very, very high confirmation charges. Any South American LCs issued, they have got high confirmation charges. So this is a directly proportional to whatever the country and the bank is. So if it is high, so it must be some reason, because it might be coming from a politically disturbed country or a very unstable bank.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, sir. Thank you. There are a lot of background noises. So thank you. Thank you. Next question, I am moving it to that is by Paima Lote. Is that possible for a bank not to pay a usance LC that is already accepted?
No, if a LC is accepted, then they have to make payment unless there is a local law prohibiting that LC to be paid. Like UCP says that local law takes precedence over UCP. So suppose if there is some injunction on that law, if there is some fraud and the court says that, okay, you hold that payment, you cannot make this payment despite the bank has already given acceptance, then of course, yes, in those cases, the payment will not be made. Apart from all these things, payment can be made.
Thank you very much. I have a further follow-on question on this. What if there is a currency embargo by a central bank, a government, and LC is already accepted?
Yeah.
So in that case,
in that case, the payment will not be made.
Thank you very much. The next is from Sia Jetmalani. She has said that thank you very much for a wonderful presentation. Then the next question is from Devon Herbal. What is the source of UCP 600, which you already covered? The next is from Moin Alawani. Is there any course online for study CDCS exam?
CDCS examination, you can log into ICC website, and there they conduct CDCS examination every year, and in fact it is twice or thrice in a year, so you can always appear that.
Thank you, Arun sir. I'm moving to next. Sorry, I'm rushing fast because we are way beyond the time and want to do justice to all. Rajat Arora, suppose LC is having confirmation clause and we will submit document without confirming with the bank mentioned in the LC. So will it become a discrepant or it's more than a discrepant?
No, I could not understand, Mr. Arora. Can you please come on mic?
गुड आफ्टरनून सर.
या गुड आफ्टरनून
सर, अगर कोई एलसी के अंदर कंफर्म क्लॉज है, मतलब 3 ऑप्शन होता है, मे ऐड, कंफर्म एंड विदाउट कंफर्मेशन. कंफर्म क्लॉज है और हम बिना कंफर्मेशन करे हम डॉक्यूमेंट प्रेजेंट कर देते हैं, तो विल इट बिकम अ डिस्क्रिपेंट?
सर आप अगर कंफर्मेशन लिखा हुआ है तो उसमें यू हैव टू वेट फॉर द कंफर्मिंग बैंक टू गिव यू कंफर्मेशन एडवाइस. दैट्स वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. आप उनसे बात कीजिए बैंक से कि since your name is added as a confirming bank, are you adding confirmation or no? So it's a bank responsibility कि वो हाँ या ना बोलेंगे.
And
If they
and charges borne by beneficiary, मतलब charges, if charges borne by beneficiary,
हाँ
and it will be our call or not. अगर मेरे ऊपर कोई चार्जेस है और मैं बियर नहीं करना चाहता हूँ, मैं विदाउट कंफर्मेशन ही डॉक्यूमेंट प्रेजेंट करना चाहता हूँ बैंक में.
नहीं तो सर ऐसा है कि अगर आपको कंफर्मेशन एलसी नहीं चाहिए तो उसमें फिर ये एलसी इशू ही क्यों हुई कंफर्म. मतलब बायर को आपको बोलना चाहिए कि बट डोंट गेट द एलसी कंफर्म. पहली बात. दूसरी बात कि अगर मान लीजिए कंफर्मेशन एलसी इशू हो ही चुकी है और आप उसमें ऐड नहीं कराना चाहते हैं कंफर्मेशन, यू आर फाइन. यू डोंट नीड टू गो विद द कंफर्मेशन एंड यू कैन रिफ्यूज द चार्जेस आल्सो. दैट्स यू आई डोंट वांट टू पे कंफर्मेशन चार्जेस.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, Rajat bhai, otherwise you can pay confirmation charges, get your funding, and recover the amount from the your counterparty separately via debit note and credit note.
Okay,
Because
thank you so much.
LC, you are always hard pressed by the time. You can't wait, otherwise there will be more discrepancy.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you, Rajat bhai. Before I move to next question, there is a small LinkedIn poll has been shared, so member can click and answer that. That will be answered very soon. Meanwhile, I'm moving to next question. That's by BVM. If LC issuing doesn't revert in 5 days of receiving the document presented by LC presenting bank or beneficiary, is it deemed to be accepted under Article 4 of UCP 600 guideline? Part 1. Part 2. Then the beneficiary bank can proceed to discount LC and credit the amount to beneficiary account.
Yeah, if the 5 days have passed, I mean the issuing bank has to revert with the discrepancy after receiving the document 5 days after the date of receiving the documents. If they have not reverted, that means they lose that option of coming back with the discrepancy. Fine. So that means that means the document presented are absolutely clean. So after that, once the documents are clean, then the negotiating bank or the nominated bank can take their own decision whether they want to act on their nomination or they want to wait for the acceptance to come and then discount. So now it becomes a standard process of negotiation between the beneficiary and the bank. So the main aspect here is that 5 days have gone, the issuing bank has not come back, so they lose their chance to reject the documents.
Thank you, sir. There are a lot of questions, but I am taking this last one, and the rest questions we can take it offline. This is from Hassan Mohammed. We are not having RMA Citibank Taiwan also. Please confirm further and advise the changes to be made in LC draft.
See, you have to see that who is your banker, and if your banker do not have any RMA with Citibank Taiwan, then you should tell your buyer to send that LC to your banker first of all. If still it is not possible, then you should choose those bank wherein your bank, because your bank also will have RMA with at least 15-20 banks in and around Taiwan or wherever. So it is always better that you should use your bank as an advising bank, and if not possible, then at least a second advising bank. So you have to speak to your buyer.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot, sir.
Now, considering the time, we have 1:32. So,
no problem, sir. We can take two or three more questions.
Okay, well noted. Then the next is Celeste Navgare. Like to know where an acceptance advice is generated against LC document, and the bank take a lot of time to credit the fund stating bank limit is not available. How should we approach bank in this regard?
Sir, I could not understand this. Mr. Salesh, can you please come on the mic?
Hello.
Yeah, tell
Can
me.
you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah, a lot of time it happens like the acceptance happens from the applicant, the advice is shared, and our issuing bank, when the advice comes that the customer has accepted the documents, so we expect the fund should be credited immediately or in a day, within 24 hours, it should come to our account. But a lot of time bank has an approach stating that the bank limit is not available to the from the applicant's bank. So it will take time. Once the limit is available, the same will be credited. And this is happening frequently these days. So I don't know whether the system has changed or how it is moving ahead.
No, sir. Actually, are you talking about Indian bank here who is not crediting?
Now, I'm based in UAE,
Okay.
Dubai.
Hmm.
So my bank is Standard Chartered,
Hmm.
as an example, and the opposite is like mostly Southeast Asia banks, like DBS
See,
banks and all.
what happened that when the documents are discrepant, then only issuing bank will go to the applicant to take their acceptance. Okay.
Correct.
So once the documents are discrepant, then you will receive a notice from issuing bank that they reject the documents and documents are at their at your disposal, and they are taking the beneficiary's consent whether to pay or not. So
Correct.
if they accept, then they will pay. After that, it's all a good banking practice that they should pay immediately. I agree with you. It's a good banking practice. But most of the time, what happens that even if the applicant credits the bank, then they have some internal problem or they don't want to make payment immediately, then they delay. But that's certainly not a good banking practice. But unfortunately, legally or technically, you cannot hold that bank responsible because they have already refused their rare responsibility because the documents were discrepant at the first place. So what you can do is that you can as a solution to this, that you can always contact your buyer, use your good offices and tell that your banker is making a lot of delay in making payment. So please make sure that it is been done immediately so as to not incur any charges from our side and all. So it is only the good office management, nothing else, sir.
Now, only concern is like now the discrepant documents has been accepted. Applicant has done all the formalities, taking the documents, clearing the goods. But the only thing it's been stuck between us and our bank, that they say limit is not available.
See, technically, if you see, even if the applicant accepts, the issuing bank still can reject the documents. Issuing bank has the authority to say, I will not make payment. Okay. But banks, since they are banks, they don't deal in all the commodity and they are the trade facilitator. So we don't think that they should do all these things. Yeah, but generally what happens that these things are sometimes really genuine also. But if every time this kind of thing is happening, then you may think of talking to some senior at the bank and trying to maybe see that okay, you can use alternate banks and also this is the only
we are in process of that. We are in process of that.
That's the only thing.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Arun. Very helpful.
Thank you, everybody. I think, Rajesh, it's high time we should wind up with a vote of thanks to Arunji. The rest questions can be taken offline. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, everybody can send it.
Sure. Now, thanks, Amirbai, for giving an opportunity to give a vote of thanks to Speaker of the Day. Mr. Arun Ambar is a very seasoned and expert on LCs and trade finance. And he has explained the complexity of LCs and trade finance in a very simpler and lucid manner. It has been a very great learning session today for me and for all of us. So on behalf of MSME Perspective as an organizer and on behalf of all the audience, Mr. Arun Ambar, thank you very much for your valuable time and sharing your expert knowledge on trade finance and LC. It was a very good learning session for all of us. Having said that, I would like to say thanks to the organizer MSME Perspective. It's a digital networking platform for MSME sector, and the event partner Discrepancy Advisory and Blossom Advisors. Discrepancy Advisory into debt syndication for SME and MSME sector, and Blossom is into debt finance and supply chain finance advisory. Thanks to both the sponsor and event. Last but not the least, thank you very much to all the audience for their valuable time and making this webinar as a grand success. I hope you all have a good value reaching session today.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for organizing such a beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, welcome, sir. Thank you to Arun once again.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Arun sir. Thanks a lot, Arun sir. It's wonderful.
Happy weekend to all.
Wishing you the same, madam.